Good afternoon. So I'm Jennifer Schenker, editor-in-chief of The Innovator. We're a global magazine about digital transformation, and I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon with Fatoumata, who is founder and CEO of Janngo, a tech for good platform. Fatoumata is passionate about using tech to help Africa leapfrog ahead by empowering women and helping SMEs. The goal is to try and create a network effect for good. Fatoumata is a computer prodigy who got her start at 8 years old by hacking into her brother's computer. She later earned a scholarship, was educated in France, and went on to work for Orange and Atos Consulting before joining Jumia, Africa's first unicorn. So with that, Fatoumata, let me start asking you, what do you feel you accomplished with Jumia? What were some of the challenges, and what are you most proud of accomplishing there?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, when it comes to the Jumia journey, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it helped us reflect back at the massive opportunities today on the African continent and the way it all started. So first of all, we are already like 1.2 billion in Africa today. We have already tripled our demography from 30 years ago, and will be 2.2 billion in 30 years, so in 2050. Secondly, the pace at which innovation is progressing is massive and is faster than anywhere else. When I was leading Jumia in Nigeria in 2015, we had double the number of internet users in only 3 years, going from 15 million internet users when we founded Jumia in 2012 to nearly 100 million internet users in 2015. So the pace at which this also technology and mobile adoption is happening is faster than anywhere else. And then thirdly, Africa is just booming. When you look today at the top 10 fastest growing economy worldwide, and it's actually the top 16s, they are all in Africa. So to us, we had this conviction that the growing African middle class have the same right as in every other region of the world to get access to affordable, quality products delivered in a convenient way. And we start looking at some numbers. And we found out that when you look at the US, for instance, you have one retail outlet for 400 inhabitants in the US. And when you look at Africa, you had at the same time in 2012, one retail outlet for 60,000 inhabitants. And in a country like Nigeria, that I had the chance to live in for a couple of years, you have Lagos, which is the capital, which is a city of 20 million souls. We had only 2 mega malls, larger than 60,000 inhabitants. So, the opportunity to use technology and match supply and this huge and growing demand was something that was an opportunity we wanted to go for and be the first one to capture. And we were right, because from starting in Nigeria and with an e-commerce player, and looking back 6 years down the line, having 3,500 people on the ground, present in 33 countries indirectly and 14 countries directly with the e-commerce model, and being today the first African tech unicorn after having raised close to 600 million inhabitants, also shows that these success stories are possible for who dares seeing Africa as I think, continent of opportunity. So I think this was one of the first things that was striking. But then in a personal way, you ask a question about, empowering women and empowering SMEs. This journey also was eye-opening for me as an African myself, because building Jumia, it happens that we actually had to find more innovative way to build our businesses and find out that we could actually deliver economic performance while solving some social challenges. And let me give you one concrete example, which is when I was again leading Nigeria in 2015. we decided with my team to start a small pilot. And we say, okay, let's go and look out at people that could benefit from the promise of e-commerce, but do not have access to internet at home, do not see our ads on Google and Facebook. And we found 120 people. At that time, it was actually housewives, because they were looking forward to getting income because they could not go outside their households very easily. And we gave them a tablet. And we say, OK, this tablet is like your digital catalog. And you can sell to your neighborhood. You can sell to your family, to your community, to your church. And when you sell, you get your commission, a bit like an online affiliation model, very traditional, very classic. And from a 120 person pilot, we grew it in 2 years to 45,000 people in Nigeria getting income out of this model. 14% of them were making twice the median Nigerian average salary. And when you got to speak to them, to interview them, they will not tell you, okay, I captured a technology opportunity. They tell you, I managed to get and earn back my dignity in my household because I'm also, a center of profit and not only a center of cost, and I can work and get dignity. So it's really something that is very powerful to me as a lesson learned. And there are so many others that we learned across building Jumia that I felt it was maybe not enough.
So let's talk about an example involving SMEs, like in Ivory Coast with fashion, because with Jumia, you really had to kind of figure out how to overcome many different issues, logistical and otherwise, to help SMEs actually connect and grow their businesses. So maybe talk about what you did with the fashion industry in Ivory Coast.
Sure, I'll be very glad to. So I think there is one thing that I loved at that time about Germany when I was founding Jumia and leading it in Côte d'Ivoire, is that you had Zalando, right? So I was spending all this night looking at the P&L of a fashion retailer, comparing it with one of, let's say, electronics retailer. And I was like, okay, if I manage to crack the fashion business, I can have, shorter time to markets, higher repurchase rate, because people will buy more often, fancy dresses like they would, rather than, changing often their phones. But I also, because again, I'm African, I care very deeply about bringing a local impact in my own territory. I wanted to find a way to involve local designers. So I went out with my team, and we found hundreds of them that were willing to sell online on Jumia. But we had so many challenges across the value chain. So I will go first and ask them, okay, what do you need as a support? And they will tell me, first, Fatou, it's very tough for us to have healthy margins. And we will brainstorm and we'll find ways to have them buy the fabrics in bulk and save money and get, this extra margin back in their pocket or give it back to end customers for better prices. And then second question, a bit more tougher. They will tell me, okay, it's great, Fatou, but I don't know what to start with. And this is very easy because we're capturing all the data on the platform, being able to say, okay, if you start with women, start with dresses, the top selling categories. If you start with men, start with shirts. And by the way, these are the top sizes and top colors, just to give them just very basic market indication that was not compromising their ability to create as an artist, but helping them be more customer-centric. So it was also an easy one. Thirdly, they will tell me, and I think it was one of the tough questions, Fatoumata, the banks are not funding us. So today, the little money that I make selling on my offline shops is where I can get my working capital financing, which is a self-financing, to be able to invest in producing all over again. And here we started having a small leap of faith. So I started in small batches and small pilots delaying my own salaries. And I started funding great designers that had great potential to sell, but did not access to traditional finance from bank. And it turned out being a massive success. And 2 years down the line, we actually created a business called Jumia Lending, which is deploying millions of euros of financing to SMEs. Because when you step back and think, actually as a tech platform, we had at least two advantages. The first one is we were actually selling to our end customers and delivering, collecting the cash before paying back back the vendors. So we are very much able to mitigate risk much better than traditional offline banks, especially since we have built a track record through their past transactions and could even predict their future sales through our marketing campaigns. And from just being an engine for trade, we became an engine for financing, which is something which is so essential because in Africa you have roughly 17 million SMEs. They are like employing up to 90% of the people, so it's huge, being it in the formal sector or in the informal sector. And when they're in the informal sector, banks do not take the risk to actually transact with them and finance them. So I think this was another testimony that technology is not a way, like in developed countries, an alternative way to do things in a fancier manner. In Africa, it's a very fundamental way to access capital, to access product, to access essential services. And I think this first learning was to me also another call to go further in my commitment leveraging technology for good in Africa.
Well, I think that's a great segue to talk about you know, your desire to go further and why you decided to leave Jumia and launch Janngo. So tell us a little bit about what your reasoning was and what you hope to achieve with Janngo.
Sure. I think I was already convinced about the opportunity side of things, and I think I shared with you very concrete and factual numbers to be able to grasp them yourselves. But I was also very concerned, being an African myself, feeling that, you know, the clock is ticking, because at some point, if we say that in 2050 will be 1 billion more Africans, it means also that we need to find a more massive, faster way to accelerate this access to essential services, products, healthcare, education, market, and funding for the SMEs. And it's really something that drove me to say, okay, I will not wait until we have this, you know, maybe great IPO or great exit and be very rich and do some, you know, targeted VC. I want to be part of a more systematic change and see how we can massively solve first access to market and funding for SMEs, and solve like some paradoxes that are very striking to me. Let's take Nigeria, for instance. It's Africa's largest demography, 200 million people and counting. It's Africa's largest economy. And you have things happening, such as Nigeria exporting crude oil and importing refined oil. Nigeria exporting raw, high-quality leather and importing leather shoes for Nigerians to wear. And Nigeria exporting quality cotton to China and importing Chinese clothes for Nigerians to wear. So I became very obsessed about saying, okay, how can we massify opportunities for SMEs? And the first challenge that my team and myself found out, which is also a challenge that we found out, of course, building Jumia, is the high cost of moving goods across Africa and from Africa to the rest of the world. If we take an example, let's take, I don't know, a phone in the US. In general, the logistic costs are up to 6 to 7% of the final cost of the goods sold. In Africa, the logistic costs can be as high as 75%. So this SME starts with, you know, this like competitiveness handicap. And that's why, for instance, we launched Export International Door-to-Door Logistics Marketplace in Côte d'Ivoire that helped these SMEs disintermediate. So first, it enables them to get access to logistics capacity. 2, to decrease the price of logistics, because it's actually quite beautiful. When you increase volumes, you decrease the unit cost, and you can, you know, be more competitive to your end customers. And 3, to also leverage everything that is convenient about track and trace and reporting using a tech platform. And it's only a starting point, because this tech for trade opportunity is very massive. When I shared with you, for instance, the ability to fund working capital, the ability to have transactional B2B2C marketplaces, but from Africa. These are things that we are looking at for the months to come, for sure.
So when you were at Jumia, you saw that the technology platform, this marketplace, actually did have a network effect for good. But in order to kind of magnify that impact, you felt like you needed to tackle some of these underlying problems like logistics. And tell us about what is the vision? So you are building this digital platform. It's going to help the SMEs with problems like logistics and other issues. How do you help, once you help solve those problems, how do you help the companies that are starting to get traction?
Yeah, I think it's quite, honestly, it's quite simple, seeing it from my point of view. Let me give you one example. So we launched Jumia as an online retailer, which means that we will go and buy and sell and take our own margin. And to be honest, while I was doing that in Côte d'Ivoire, I had two big challenges. The first one was ethical, because I felt I was competing with all these hustlers, extremely talented, that were doing twice a month a trip to Shenzhen or Dubai to source their own goods and come and sell them to their own customers. And that was a problem, at least for me as an African. And then the second one was more a challenge that is a business challenge, which is with this model, we were actually growing only through our ability to buy and to purchase, and hence we are ourselves depending to grow on our own working capital abilities. So building a true marketplace, which is saying, okay, I'm not going to compete with these guys, but I will be an engine of trade for them, and I will find for them ways to do marketing and way to do last mile logistics, was actually the tipping point of our success. And that's how we were able, in 6 to 7 years, to give opportunities to 500,000 SMEs in Africa. And that's also how we were able to grow much faster our assortment, grow the selection, grow the categories, diversity, grow the also attractiveness of the price, and then become a leader. So to me, it's actually the opportunity provided that helps the SMEs thrive and that actually have a benefic effect in us, and not the opposite. And that's the thesis and the core thesis of Janngo, which is it's too easy to come and say, okay, we will sell you a technology solution. People are not interested about tech. They have problems and pain points for which technology is an accelerator, have a leapfrog effect. And that's really our thesis, because decreasing logistic costs is very concrete. In any countries in the world, logistics sectors is between 6 and 20% of the GDP. And seeing how it's a burden for them today, we know that just decreasing that massively creates for them a better competitiveness. We also know that reducing the time to markets and having, for instance, the cashew nuts from Côte d'Ivoire go directly to you in Germany, rather than going to Indonesia and Vietnam to be packaged for them to be shipped and sold, is also a way to create better and, let's say, value creation locally, and more jobs locally, and more tax locally.
So there's a challenge here, though, because with a for-profit company like that's funded by traditional venture capitalists, the real objective, of course, is to make as much money as possible. So as you mentioned, if it's cheaper to have people who are selling goods from Asia online than locals, then that's what it makes sense for the company to do. So the challenge that you are taking on is showing that it's possible to build a profitable business while at the same time having social impact as a goal from day one. And so how did you approach that when it came to raising money, for example?
Jennifer, I think that's maybe the most exciting part of our conversation. Because being a tech entrepreneur, of course, I traveled the world. I met Steffi in Shenzhen at the World Economic Forum. I went to Silicon Valley Bank in San Francisco. And I was also very careful about finding the right role models for tech for Africa. Because to me, chasing unicorn is something great. We take a good pride at Jumia for being the first African unicorn, but it's not enough. Because when technology is disconnected from the real economy, it's not something that for us in Africa is good enough for us when we look at the development challenges and when we look also at the opportunities. And that's why the core thesis that we have at Janngo is that we don't have to choose between doing well in terms of economic returns and doing good in terms of social impact. And it's really something that we are not the first to believe in. You have so many other companies today operating in Africa, such as telcos, such as airlines. When you look at their P&L, you will see that Africa is a cash cows. They do a lot of profits, and they have very tremendous returns. Again, because in so many sectors, you don't have enough competition, you don't have enough capital yet. But if you go further and target, again, the inclusion, target job creation, target access to opportunities for SMEs, target access to essential services and goods and financial services, you see also this ripple effect, which is to us like a network effect for good. And today, to me, it's really something that needs to have a very strong awareness, because you can have the same level of returns as you are having in the developed countries, if not higher, and that you are having in a pure financial perspective, if not higher, while still, feeling better when you wake up in the morning or when you go to bed about, helping advance the progress of humanity somehow. And again, I don't see another way for us Africans as solving our own problems, because the pace at which our demography is growing, as I shared, is fast and big. And even for you, Europe, it took you 150 years to go from 250 million inhabitants to 750 million. It's taking us 60 years to go from 600 to 2.2. And even China, it will take them 100 years to go from 500 to 1.5 billion inhabitants. So no one else, no other region in humanity is facing the magnitude of the challenges that we are facing. That's why the model needs to be right from the beginning, between, okay, bringing the money back to investors, because it's about what venture capital is about, but still finding ways by developing the continent faster, because we give, again, access to opportunities to all these people that are as talented as in every other region, because I do believe that talent is very equally distributed, but opportunities aren't. And what we were able to prove massively with Jumia is when we give them the opportunities, they are as good, if not better, and they help us actually have a very strong growth and very strong market leadership. So we should not have to choose between profit and purpose, and we should not have to choose between doing well and doing good. And you have to stop seeing Africa as a place where risks are overestimated and opportunities underestimated. Because to me, that's the only reason why you see India being today 1.3 billion inhabitants, 3,000 billion GDP. It's the same GDP, same size as Africa today, getting 17 times more money in their venture capital, when we have, I think, at least 100 million more mobile phones, right? So we are even more a mobile-first continent, but we get less funding.
But I think it's important to note that you have convinced mainstream investors. You have the family office behind the Auchan supermarket chain that has invested with a long-term point of view. You have the investment bank Clipperton. So it's not just kind of social funds, but investors who see the financial opportunity that you are outlining for Africa. And I think, others should perhaps start looking at Africa in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's really something essential. Our social thesis starts with the economical thesis, right? When you give and when you lift SMEs up, not only lift the entire economy up, but this is where he has the disposable income to send his girl to school, to have affordable healthcare. So we really believe in this bottom-up endogenous growth, and not only to the infrastructure-led, growth that we see, that are also helping so many African countries record high GDP growth for the last decade. And again, we are also in a unique position to prove that those models are not wishful thinking, that they are working, that they are growing, and that they are solving social problems that are very urgent for us. And I think also that is exciting that we were not foreseeing at the beginning. If you take, for instance, Orange, which is one of the worldwide leading telcos, they started learning how to do financial services in Africa, because they have seen a successful solution such as M-Pesa, which is very, very widespread in Kenya. It's a mobile banking solution that is today capturing more than 50% of the GDP of Kenya already. So they started Orange Money in Africa. with a record growth, and that's why they decided to come back to France and to launch a bank. So not only Africa is a place where we need to find great ways to solve social problems, leveraging technology while delivering great economic returns, but when you solve those problems in Africa, you can come back to developed countries and sometimes apply them to have a competitive edge. And it's also the power of leapfrog, it's also the power of reverse innovation. So what are you waiting?
So, so I think that's a great point to end our discussion with this call to action that you have given the entire room. Let's stop measuring network effect with number of eyeballs and revenue, but also measure by the impact we can have in improving the world. Thank you very much.